All right, let's set the stage. Picture the West Coast in the 1970s. If you were looking for cannabis, your options were pretty limited, flavor-wise.
Totally. You basically had two choices. You had the spicy, kind of sharp Colombian and Thai landraces, or you had the really earthy, heavy Afghan indicas.
That was the entire menu. But up in Oregon, a breeder, DJ Short, he decided that just wasn't good enough. He was on this singular mission to find something new.
Something completely different. He was chasing color, a certain kind of calm high, and most importantly, a fruity flavor that, just didn't exist in the market.
And that's the mission for this deep dive, right? We're going to track that specific journey. How one person's vision basically rewired cannabis flavor as we know it today.
Exactly. We're going to break down how he took this stack of really diverse, almost chaotic genetics and created the blueberry line. And for you listening, the real value here is seeing how targeted selection and, well, the courage to break the rules can totally transform an entire category.
Okay, so let's talk about that starting palette. I mean, the raw material he was working with was wild. It all kicked off with some Thai seeds, right?
Yeah, seeds from imported Thai weed, which he got his hands on all the way back in 1972 from Ypsilanti, Michigan, of all places.
So that was the foundation. But he started adding to it pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah. He brought in the classics. You had Acapulco Gold, Highland Oaxacan, and then the really critical piece, that early Afghan scents.
And that was the high-grade seedless flower that was popular then.
Right. So this was his raw clay, a collection of genetics that were amazing on their own, but let's just say they didn't play well together. They were fundamentally opposed in terms of stability.
What's so interesting is that at first, he was almost entirely focused on those tropical sativas, the Thai stick, the Oaxacan, the Acapulco Gold.
He was chasing the flavor and the color, and that's where he thought the potential was. I mean, there's this great detail about him sprouting seeds from Hawaiian buds in a cereal box seed kit.
A cereal box kit. I love that.
And just running them under some basic fluorescent lights. It was pure DIY passion.
That detail really paints a picture, doesn't it? This wasn't some corporate lab. This was true underground artistry. But these tropical sativas, they were a huge challenge.
A massive challenge. These were 16 to 18-week plants. They had amazing color and aroma, but their growth structure was just pure chaos. Sprawling everywhere.
Beautiful, but not practical at all.
Exactly. You had the flavor, but you didn't have the speed or the structure you'd need. And the solution to that problem, the counterbalance, it arrived in late 1978.
And this is the crazy part. The seeds for a pure Afghan indica were passed to him by a manicurist.
Yeah, a manicurist. It wasn't some scientific exchange, It just shows you how genetics moved around back then, hand to hand.
So this Afghan brought everything the sativas were missing.
Yeah.
Short, fast, resinous, that skunky smell. But this is where the real genius move comes in.
This is the turning point. The industry standard at the time, the way everyone did it, was you'd take your hardy, structurally solid Afghan females, your mothers, and you'd hit them with sativa pollen.
Wait, why was that the standard? I mean, what was the thinking there? Weren't you risking losing the flavor by not using the sativa as the mother?
Well, the consensus was that sativa mothers were just too chaotic, too slow. A tropical sativa mother might not finish flowering until December. Breeders were afraid the offspring would inherit that weak, sprawling structure.
So it would be commercially useless, susceptible to mold and everything else.
Exactly. The Afghan female was the safe bet, the reliable frame you could build on.
But DJ Short flipped it.
He flipped it entirely. He used indica pollen on his tropical sativa mothers. It was a huge risk, a complete genetic reversal.
So he was risking the structure to chase the flavor.
Yeah.
A calculated risk. His goal was so specific, he wanted to tighten up the plant and shorten the flowering time traits from the indica pollen while locking in that complex fruit and clarity that he could only get from the sativa mother. So the pollen provides the structure and the mother provides the flavor. That reversal is the whole breakthrough.
It is. And the very first keeper strain that came out of that early work, the Thai crossed with the Afghan, was a plant he named Flow.
Flow. Okay, so what made Flow the first keeper? Why was it so important?
Flow was the proof of concept. It was the first time that the heavy, dense Afghan structure had successfully framed that sativa spirit. It was faster, but it was also cleaner and way more flavor-forward than a typical Afghan cross.
So once he knew that worked, that the genetic flip could deliver a predictable result.
It cleared the path. The structural problem was solved. Now he could focus entirely on the much more complicated berry hunt.
And this is where we get into the real nitty-gritty of selection, the F generations. He starts with the F1s, the first cross.
Right. And those F1 plants, they grew out pretty uniform. Medium-sized, people describe them as Lebanese-like spears. The terpenes, the flavors, were still kind of mixed and muted at this stage.
It's like mixing two primary colors and getting a consistent but kind of dull purple.
That's a perfect analogy. The unique traits are hidden. So to find them, he crossed those F1s with each other to create the F2 generation. And that is where the chaos split open.
What does that actually look like? When you say chaos split open, does that mean every single plant is suddenly wildly different?
That's exactly what it means.
Yeah.
This is where all those hidden recessive traits from the grandparents just explode back into view. You suddenly get the whole spectrum. Flavors went everywhere. Citruses, woods, florals, and finally, the berry phenotypes he was hunting for.
So this was his moment. With all that variation, he could finally be incredibly selective.
Extremely. He wasn't just looking for something nice. He was looking for the one plant that, as he put it, screamed berry and sweetness.
And he followed that scent.
Exclusively. This is where the discipline comes in. Out of hundreds of plants, he had to find the one berry mother and the one berry father that best expressed that aroma to, lock the lane for all the future generations.
And that obsession with flavor is what drove the whole rest of the project.
Absolutely. If you trace the next steps, when he crossed those two berry F2 parents, the resulting F3 generation, about half the plants were reliably carrying that food characteristic. That's huge progress.
But 50% wasn't enough for him.
Nope. He did another focused round of selection, breeding the best of the F3s, and that pushed the fruit presence in the F4 generation up to 75%.
Wow.
And the result was a plant that was colorful, calm, reliably aromatic, and just totally different from the hashy indicas that were flooding the scene at the time. You'd done it, structure plus fruit.
What's so fascinating to me, though, is that it didn't even have its famous name yet.
Yeah.
By 1980, no one was calling it blueberry.
That's right. The name was totally organic. It came from the customers. People just kept coming back and asking for the kind. That was it. Because it was so much better than anything else.
It wasn't until the 90s that the name blueberry actually stuck.
Yeah, by then it had gained this almost mythic reputation across the Pacific Northwest, and the world just sort of collectively decided to call that berry line blueberry.
And the way it spread is such a classic underground story. It wasn't marketing, it was just hand-to-hand.
Completely. Through the 80s and 90s, cuts of blueberry, blue velvet, blue moonshine, they all moved through these closed networks. DJ Short was passing them on himself, turning that blue funk flavor into a local legend long before any seed packs or big companies got involved.
But eventually the commercial side did catch up, which really proved how stable his work was. He dropped seed stock in the early 90s, and then in 98 he selected the specific father plant that won him the High Times Magazine Cup in 2000.
And that's when the ripple effect went global. That stable berry line became a powerhouse for breeding. It's the genetic backbone for modern giants like Blue Dream in California and Blue Cheese over in the UK.
It was more than just a win for him, though. It was a cultural shift. I mean, for a lot of people, blueberry was the first time they'd ever had weed that tasted specifically like fruit.
It fundamentally changed consumer expectations. It proved flavor could be just as important as potency.
So let's tie this all together. We've gone from these wild, spicy landraces to a meticulously sculpted fruit flavor, all because of a technical, really audacious breeding reversal. The big takeaway for you listening is that even in nature, things can be carefully shaped by discipline and, well, a willingness to flip the script.
Right. When you connect this to the bigger picture, the story shows that revolutionary change often happens when you challenge standard practice. Using that dense indica pollen on the sprawling sativa moms, it created a balance of structure and flavor that the industry just didn't think was possible.
He used the dominant force in a supporting role.
Exactly. He used structure to support and preserve the prized feature, which was the flavor.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? It makes you wonder what other traditional pairings in any field you're in might be holding back innovation. And what could happen if the thing you always thought had to be in the lead role was instead used to support something new?